So I could see that people in Singapore and Hong Kong, Los Angeles, wherever, they were downloading it. So I thought, why are they downloading it? And I realized they are eavesdropping on each other. They want to hear what's going on and what everyone else is doing.
Hello and welcome to today's episode of Britta's Hafen podcast. My name is Britta Inga Müller. Usually, all my podcasts are in German language, but today we talk English. I am really excited because Lena Gothberg is my guest today. Lena Gothberg is host and producer of the Shipping Podcast. She inspired me to start with my podcast. When I planned to start podcasting, I didn't know what would be the best microphone to buy and which tool can I use for the post-production. On the internet, I found a lot of recommendation, but I was unsure. I wrote an email to Lena, and on the next day, I received her answer. She sent all her recommendations and a lot of tips. I was so thankful for all these very helpful information. Also for that, but especially because of the Shipping Podcast, I am a big fan of Lena Gothberg. She talks about such a variety of topics and so many guests all over the world on her podcast, and I like to listen to it so very much. Now you can probably imagine why I am so excited today. Before we start, I like to say thank you to the Fair Play Towage Group who supports my podcast. Here we go. My guest today is Lena Gothberg, all the way from Sweden. I'm so excited. My guest today is Lena Gothberg. She is host and producer of the Shipping Podcast. This is a podcast where people from all over the world are guests, and all of them are working in or connected to the maritime industry. The podcast started in 2015 already. I started to listen to it in 2019, and the Shipping Podcast was the inspiration for my podcast. And I'm so happy that Lena takes the time today to be my guest. So hello and welcome, Lena.
Thank you, Britta. Thank you for inviting me. It's something special for me to be the guest. I'm usually the host and asking all the questions. So I'm looking forward to this.
Great. So thank you very much for your time today. May I ask you to introduce yourself, please?
Well, you have introduced me as the host and the producer of the Shipping Podcast, and that is what I do. But if I go back in my career, I started studying law and started working for a non-marine insurance company where I was recruited to work for a marine insurance broking house in Gothenburg. So at that time, we're talking now 1990. I am as old as that. It was a startup. You would still call it a startup today. And I stayed there for 10 years. And then I was headhunted to go and become an underwriter for Hull and Machinery Insurance for ships. So I was employed by Codan, which is part of Royal and Sun Alliance, which is a huge insuring house. I was in charge of the Swedish part of that and worked in a Nordic management team. I stayed there for 9 years and then I started my own company and worked with business intelligence for the maritime industry. I was the Secretary General for something called Institute of Shipping Analysis, which was everything you need to know to do some business plans for the maritime industry. Everything from the order book at the yards to macroeconomics and where will the crew come from and all of that. So that was rather exciting. And during that time, I decided to start my podcast. In parallel with this, I've also been a vivid member of Vista. So I was the president of Vista, which is Women's International Shipping and Trading Association. I was the president in Sweden 2004 to 2008. And I met so many women during that time. And also, a couple of years ago, I was the head of communications for Vista in 55 countries on a weekly basis or something like that. So I have a lot of connections in the maritime world, which I wanted to share with my listeners.
That's fantastic. It's such an interesting background, and that's great that you have been the president of Vista. I'm a Vista member as well for 2 years now, and I'm so impressed how many interesting women are members. And when I meet them, I'm really impressed about what they do and what they do with their daily business.
Yes, and how much they're willing to share. And I get energy from attending Vista meetings because everyone is so enthusiastic.
Yes, that's right. So you started your podcast already in 2015. Have you heard at that time a lot of podcasts by yourself?
No, I hadn't. I listened to a lot of radio when I was a small child. I enjoy audio. I enjoy listening to people talking. No, I hadn't listened to many podcasts at that time. I think podcast became more popular once there was an app on the mobile phone which was a sort of standalone. And that happened in October 2014. So, I mean, yeah, podcast was invented sometime during the, 2004 or 5 or something like that. But the first time they came out with, on the iPhone, separate little app where you could listen to podcasts, that was in October 2014.
So it was a brand new idea to start with podcasts in 2015. Great. When I go through all your topics from podcasting, you have so different topics. Like for the ones who don't know your podcast already, the last episodes were General Average with Alison Cusack, principal lawyer from Australia, with Lena Gothberg. You had episodes SAR, mission coordinator, and the Joint Rescue Coordination Center. And in total, it's 257 episodes, which shows the diversity and on the other hand, also the complexity of the maritime industries. How do you get your ideas who can be your next guest?
I think a lot. Can I say that? No, but I mean, if you have listened to my podcast, I usually end with asking my guests, who do you think that you would want to listen to? So I get a lot of ideas there and tips from people who are on the podcast. But also, I attend a lot of gatherings, conferences, and so on, and listen to good speakers. And then I ask them, would you like to become a guest on my podcast? And I don't know, but having a microphone and a podcast looks a little bit like Sesame open up. People want to become a guest. Also, I get tips from my friends, or I think about the topic that I want to discuss, and then I go and find that person who is the expert and who I want to talk to about that.
Do you have a favorite episode from your podcast by yourself?
I don't dare to have a favorite because then everyone else will be upset.
Okay, but is there one episode where you say, wow, I didn't knew that before?
I think everyone who is telling their story is telling me something new, which means that I learn from everyone that I speak to. So I don't know. I mean, there are some people who have stuck on in my mind that I really enjoy talking to, or just the experience of being somewhere, which is great. I had the pleasure of speaking with the IMO Secretary General a couple of months ago, and that was special. I was invited to his office, which I didn't know he had an office like that, and that was interesting too, for an experience for me, and to listen to him talking about the maritime industry and what he wants to achieve. That was interesting.
I can imagine. For me, it's always wonderful time to listen to your podcast. And I'd like to give one example about a thing I never thought about before. You had one episode with Stuart Ostro about ship money. This was an episode about seafarers and how they get paid, about virtual debit cards for seafarer. And to be honest, I didn't even think about this topic before. It's not something I'm getting in contact every day. So it was so interesting. And after that, I recognized that it's so difficult for a seafarer to get something paid with a credit card, and they cannot order anything at Amazon or something else. To get the money transferred to their families back home is also a topic. And that was so interesting. And there are so many topics you have, and that's great. I love your podcast.
Thank you, Britta. Well, when I started, my main purpose starting it was that I wanted more people to understand about the maritime industry, because we are a hidden industry. No one talks about us unless there is something wrong. And as a comparison, I do a lot of work for an organization working with broadband connectivity, and it's the same thing. No one talks about it until it doesn't work anymore. Then you get upset because it doesn't work. You don't have any connection with your mobile or whatever. And it's the same in a way with the maritime industry. As long as we do our work, as long as everything works and we do our job, no one talks about us. But just think about Ever Given or something else happening, and people get upset because it doesn't work as it usually does. And we need to talk about the good things in the maritime industry. We can't just be on the front page the day when everything has gone haywire. We need to be there to talk about the good stuff. And I mean, we are an industry like anyone else, but we have some special challenges that we want to address. And maybe people who doesn't know about it doesn't really know that they can come into our industry and work. So that is why I'm talking about these different things. In addition to that, I'm a curious person, so I want to know what everyone else is doing. So I set out to spread the word about the maritime industry. And then after a while, I realized that the podcast was downloaded in the maritime hubs around the world. So I could see that people in Singapore and Hong Kong, Los Angeles, wherever, they were downloading it. So I thought, why are they downloading it? And I realized they are eavesdropping on each other. They want to hear what's going on and what everyone else is doing. And fine, okay. But that meant that I also had to do a little bit, to change a little bit about who would I want to have as a guest. In addition to that, I also wanted to give a platform for female voices, because there were no women interviewed or showcased anywhere to 2015. So that is what I did. It took me 5 years to come to equilibrium, to have equally many men as women as guests on my podcast. But I had a goal and I achieved it.
Congratulations. That's great. You talked about the positive things that the maritime industry is talking about, and I like to talk about two persons that were also guests at your podcast, is Captain Kate and Captain Thomas. And they are so famous on social media. So I'd like to talk about this interview as well. Did you met Captain Kate and Captain Thomas before you had them in your podcast?
I have done one solo with Captain Kate, one solo with Captain Thomas, and one with them together. So there are three of them to listen to.
You were right.
The first one I did with Captain Kate, I met her in Malmö at the World Maritime University. The World Maritime University arranged the third, I think, or maybe fourth, third international conference for women in maritime. And she had traveled there. And I asked her if she wanted to become a guest on my podcast. I didn't know how famous she was, but it was really like meeting a film star, just talking to her. And she was so lovely and so nice. And we talked about her and her career. And and her cat at that time. And
for the few listeners who doesn't know who are we talking about, Captain Kate and Captain Thomas are very famous on Instagram, and I will put their links on the show notes. So what happened when you asked Captain Thomas?
he immediately said, yes, of course. So when I interviewed him, he said that he had listened to Captain Kate and he would so much like to talk to her. And I said, well, maybe I can arrange that then. And I invited both of them. And Captain Kate said, yeah, wow. She also knew about Captain Thomas, of course. I mean, if we have two superstars on social media in this industry, it's them. So they came along, both of them came on my Zoom, and I was amazed just to see them there. And I had asked people to send in questions to them. So I put questions to them, but after a while, they were having a conversation. I was not in that conversation, which was so lovely to hear that they were talking about, and they were definitely talking about other stuff than you usually talk about. So, yeah, they were both happy once the interview was over. There's so much more material. I could probably do another episode with them just from that interview. But yeah, they are very dear to my heart. And then the next time when Captain Thomas happened to call Port of Gothenburg with his ship, it was during the pandemic when ship owners had to try and find the containers to go to Asia to change where they were. He came to Gothenburg and yeah, we had lunch. We had a really good time. And he has promised to come back the next time. He will tell me when he's back.
That's fantastic. I can imagine that that was a good time. And I also listened to that podcast where both of them were talking together. This was really amazing. I love that episode as well. That's great. Social media is one thing I like to talk about. I'm not sure if this social media things are just be viewed by the young people or if it's really a change in the decision to search for a job or to start a career within the maritime industry. What do you think about it? It's great that it gets awareness, the maritime industry, but I'm not sure if this is changing decisions for people. Do you think?
Well, maybe it opened people's eyes to reality. I mean, if you are working on a ship, you can show what kind of tasks you're doing, and that might inspire someone.
Mhm.
Also, if you're talking about things you do, I mean, there are so many good people, especially on Instagram, I think. Captain Kate and Captain Thomas has done an excellent job
Absolutely.
promoting the industry. But there are so many more, and I think that the women are more on Instagram. I don't know, but it's the young people. And I think, I mean, if they show what they are doing at their work to their friends, there might be a bigger understanding of what we do and how we do it and things like that. I think that's great. Yeah, I think it's having an impact on people's how they view the maritime industry because we have always been so closed. We haven't shown the world what we do and what we can do. I can't really talk about what difference it had made to people applying for jobs in the maritime industry. But I don't think it does any harm. I think it's for the better.
You say it very well. An impact is great, and the both of them and all the others do an excellent job to show all the exciting things on board and all the difficult things that you can learn at these jobs. I think that's great also for me to view it on Instagram. You said the word impact. I like to ask you, can you say some words about your download numbers or your figures for your podcast, please?
Yeah, I looked it up today. I have had 598,223 downloads of my podcast since I
Wow.
started, which is amazing. I mean,
Yes. Congratulations. That's
thank you.
great.
And it's downloaded in more than 220 countries around the world nowadays.
Wonderful. Great.
So and I thought, my God, when I started, I thought, oh, I have to force my brother to listen to this. He won't get any Christmas present unless he listens. I don't think he has listened to any episode, but so many other people. And I realize it's a lot of young people because they reach out to me. They send me messages or emails or whatever. There is no really good tool for knowing the statistics when it comes to audio. I can see in which country people are downloading. And I can't be sure that they are listening when they are downloading. It could be that you have set your phone to that you are downloading wherever you are. I don't know. And then last year, Apple did a change. So you can't really count more than 3 episodes. You can't really have more than 3 episodes on queue on your mobile, which meant that so if you had 10 episodes you haven't listened to yet, I could have that. And then I would bulk listen to them all. But I can't anymore. It's limited to 3, which means on the other hand, I can't have more than 3 downloads from each listener or each follower or whatever, which has an impact on everyone's statistics. Still, I know that I have most listeners in the United States, then in the UK, the Nordic countries, and that is what I can remember. I think I did a top 10 list a few months back to see where are people downloading my podcast, because that is interesting for possible people who want to support or advertise or whatever.
I'm deeply impressed, and it's great to have such a huge number of people who listen to your podcast, but it's all about you. It's because you did it. So, and I love your podcast. It's great. I cannot say that I listen to every episode. Sometimes it's difficult, but then I take the time and then I listen also 2 or 3 in a row. This is fantastic to have your podcast.
Thank you. I think it's only me and my editor who listens to each and every episode. And I usually listen twice to my episode once it's ready to hear that everything is okay when it's released and it's available to everyone. So,
Do you have, when you have private time, do you listen to podcasts as well?
yeah, all the time. I have actually had a week now when my AirPods broke down. So, and I didn't find the time to order new ones. So I've been like, what's wrong? There's something I don't listen because I usually listen a lot. I listen when I go shopping or if I'm driving or wherever I go. I have my AirPods in my ears and I listen to podcasts. I think I'm addicted to listening to podcasts.
And may I ask, what's your favorite? What are you listening to?
Well, it's a lot of Swedish, of course, podcasts, and then I listen to trendy people who are talking about where are we going in society and things like that. But I also listen to tech pods about AI, for instance. How can AI influence the society, and where do we go from here? I listen to politics, of course. We can't really have any podcast anymore without mentioning that there is something going on in the US. So we had to listen to different views of how that is perceived. I listen to podcasts about trade. I think that is my thing. Also listen to podcasts about gardening because I like that. And a lot of nonsense, just to have something to listen to.
That's a big variety of podcasts you are listening to. Great.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lena. I have one more question regarding your future. You are sending a newsletter every 2 weeks about your new episode, and then I got a newsletter where you wrote, "Shall I stay or should I go?" At the first moment, my heart goes up, and I thought, no, Lena will not stop her podcast. Can you say something about your plans now?
Yeah. I don't know my plans yet.
Okay, still exciting.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, I've been doing this for 10 years, and
Yeah.
the podcasting industry has changed. As I said before, today, if you start a podcast today, it's very easy. You don't have to know anything about, what to do in the background. You don't have to know everything about how to upload a podcast or get it out to people's mobile, or you don't have to edit it. You can just start. And especially, you have to do a video because that is what is now trendy, a video to share on YouTube. And I can't really understand why people want to watch me working. And then it means that I need to start doing, more video for social media, as we talked about before. And I'm not sure if I want to do that. I mean, why? And then have I done my part of influencing the maritime industry after 10 years? Or is there more for me to do? Sort of, that is what I started asking myself. So I took a break. I took a break for a month and a half or something like that. And also, last autumn, I was working on a project where there was a toxic working environment. And it was so hard to find any energy and enthusiasm to do podcasting at that time. So I stopped. But I realized that I missed it. I want to ask people what they're doing. I want to talk to them. I want to understand what makes them tick for the maritime industry. So I haven't really decided yet what to do. But I mean, the 10-year anniversary is the last of July 2025. I started the last of July 2015. So there is still time to go. And I have people lined up for more interviews in pipeline. So we'll see what happens. I don't know.
Okay, so it's still exciting. I'm looking forward to your decision and what you will do in the next time. One last question is, do you plan to come to Hamburg in this year?
I haven't made any plans to go to Hamburg, but you never know. Things can change in a day or two to go to Hamburg. I have been to Hamburg before and I really like that city, so it's not impossible.
Yeah, that sounds great. Lena, thank you so very much for your time and your answers and everything within this podcast. I'm still a big fan of your podcast and thank you for all the episodes you did. All the best for you and have a great day today.
Thank you very much, Britta. It was my pleasure to be your guest.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.
Thank you very, very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed. Have a great day today. Bye bye.